Vale, para quien no sepa qué estamos viendo, lo que vamos a ver aquí es importante. Vamos a ver la reposición del panel que pusieron ayer sobre ítems y sobre diseño de ítems y mecánicas. Vamos a ver qué nos cuentan de ítems y mecánicas. Este es importante, este cambia muchas cosas.
Aquí.
Pero mira las gafitas y el gorro. ¿Cómo se nota que has estudiado artes?
Póntelo aunque sea con tus cascos. Que puedan escuchar esto,
¿Y qué
aunque no
pasa,
escuchen
hambre,
eso.
no?
Vale, eso sí. Tú sí lo estás oyendo, ¿no?
Estoy en ello. Pero no creo que tarde mucho.
Si tienes una entrada de jack en el móvil, yo tengo auriculares de jack.
No, sí, auriculares de jack me he traído. Me he traído los cascos del PC y auriculares de jack.
Pues si necesitas la wifi,
Eso sí que lo voy a necesitar.
pues tienes el router por detrás, que está arriba en el
No
salón.
hace falta.
Él dice que no hace falta.
Si me pones el QR.
Exacto.
Bajito se oye, ¿no? Voy a subirle el volumen.
Dios. ¿Soy solo yo o se ve impresionante?
Es el tío, gente, y le falta un poco de sangre.
Está
cambiada, Abraham, es un baiteo.
Como que pobre hijo de puta, que te baneo.
That's not going to happen anymore. PoE2, the 2D art always comes from the 3D art because we render it out at high quality. In the past,
Soy Khan, gracias por la sub.
the 2D art was a bit of a mishmash of all sorts of stuff.
Munhan me llama ahora. Bueno, estaba 5 minutos baneado, ¿eh?
From the icons folder, some of it looks like a 3D model, it's like A-posed. Some of it's like a photo, just a straight up photo. Some of it's like super cartoony, like this guy down here. It ends up with a very inconsistent kind of front end to the game. Like you guys are used to it. You play the game so many years and items get added over time that it doesn't really matter. But it was always a bit of a problem to me that things look inconsistent. It's because different artists have different approaches to how they just paint and render and do things, and sometimes they'll be like, we need a unique yesterday. So someone will just get a photo of a shield, I guess. And so PoE2, these aren't the same items as the previous screen, so don't freak out that Calm's heart now looks like that, because that's not it. This is just an example of similar size stuff. Basically, every single item, even if it's a small thing, gets through the full treatment. I was modeling little gum nuts for that little potion bottle right there just to render it. The flasks are all redone in 3D, everything's redone in 3D.
Igual no está esto enfocado como nosotros pensábamos que estaba enfocado, ¿no?
En algún momento hablando de eso.
Everything in your inventory, everything in your stash.
¿De qué quieres que hable?
De los ítems como concepto de lo que te dan, lo que te quitan, lo que te suman, dos manos, tres manos, implícitos, no de diseño 3D.
No lo habéis entendido, están hablando de arte, de ítem.
Esa es la parte que a mí personalmente pues pensé que me iban a hablar de los ítems como el diseño de los ítems, en plan llevar esta vara supone llevar este implícito, con lo que no tengo un 6L, tengo un 7L.
A ver, gente, no es que le falte, no es que le falte ganas a este señor hablando. Lo que pasa es que como es estudiante de artes, se ha fumado un porro.
Joder.
No. El pobre pasa hambre y no tiene energía. Hay que ser cierto.
Y le anda 50 euros al que estaba en la puerta pidiendo para que explicara. ¿Qué temperatura hace allí? Que va la gente con sudadera y con chaquetas.
Dos factores. Claro, es vegano, por eso no tiene energía.
A ver, ayer es invierno.
Os recuerdo que después de este evento viene una charla de media hora de creadores de contenido y luego empezamos con el panel de desarrolladores de preguntas y respuestas, otro showcase de Cripadrian de 1 hora, otro diseño de música de 1 hora, otra hora entera de entrevista entre Cizaram y Steelmage luego una mesa redonda, otra charla y el evento de cierre. O sea que estamos por aquí.
Realmente cuando empiezas son las 11:30.
Sí, esto es un replay de ayer. El evento físicamente hoy, que para ellos creo que ya es domingo, no ha empezado. Van 12 horas por delante. Ellos que empiezan a las 11 de la mañana. Y les pillan la mitad de las entrevistas a la hora de comer. Vamos a que tengan horario inglés y llegan justo recién comidos.
Like I said, even the small stuff gets the same treatment. So we got some
5
amulets
grados
and
lloviendo, te dice ahora.
these three I'll let you figure out what they
Amber,
might
Jade, lápiz, han cambiado el diseño de los ítems. Bueno, a ver, se ve bastante bien.
But yeah, they go through the same treatment. We have a
Ya
lot
te
of
escucho.
control because they're 3D.
Se ve muy bonito.
Try, you know, just
Sí,
play
pero ¿con
around
qué
with
frecuencia
what they
miras
are,
tú
and
a
it's
este
very
nivel de
hard to
detalle
get
los
an
ítems del
artist to say,
juego?
I think I want the sword
Eso es un
This way.
talismán, pero
and painted like that, and they go,
Pues
well, I
te
just have
quita
to
de
repaint the whole thing then.
bueno, pero que no.
Which they don't.
Por favor.
Bueno, tú no, pero por ejemplo yo sí, a mí sí me mola fijarme en eso.
And, these
¿Ves?
were
Esto sí me
fun
interesa
ones.
más.
We
Solo de
got to
Chrome.
redesign what
El transmutation, el aumentation.
previous
El alchemy se ve
chat.
bastante
head
bien.
honcho Eric, who's now retired.
En Anulmen.
Me gusta la Nulme como pegándote un tiro.
Little baby, he's actually printed
En
massive
Anulmen no hace
scale
gracia.
cast bronze of these things.
El Val, que lo
He's
estoy
got a
enseñando.
huge exalted orb that's like this big. But yeah, it was mostly just
Pero son todos como
get
físicamente
them
bastante
to be more
parecidos.
cohesive, so they've got that same kind of
Te explica lo que hace.
that Roman
¿Y el caos?
kind of bust head thing
Ah,
going
está.
on with a lot of them.
Sí, pero en la lista de izquierda no.
Yeah, and so
No,
they
la
all
lista de
get
izquierda
the
no,
same
es que ahí te están
treatment,
mostrando
even if
más.
they're a little guy.
El Val está el caos gritando, tío.
Sí.
The base types. First
Parece unos
six,
sabrones, ¿no?
so the different
A mí me parece más el
uh,
peto de
character
conversión.
branches. So I don't know if you're able to tell, but there is a gradient that occurs here.
Sí, el annulment y lo de que sea pegarte un tiro en la frente es mucho más gráfico ahora.
Int strength.
El Anulmen te deja bien claro lo que hace.
Oh, sorry, strength and then strength.
Lo que no sabéis es lo que hace el caos en Poe 2. Eso también lo explicaron ayer en una de las entrevistas. El caos ahora en Poe 2
Ahora lo
ya
vamos
no
a ver.
hace el random. Ahora lo que hace es que te quita uno fijo y te pone otro. Es un annulment exante. El crafteo en Poe 2 es una enorme putada. También te quitan el alteration.
This comes into the naming of things, which is also,
Dios señor, por favor.
you know, as a visual person, it's another thing.
Le falta un
It-
poco de
it
sangre, ¿eh?
actually had an impact on the art in a
Sí,
cool
no,
way.
es algo
que
que-
el nombre
So every single
de
dex base
la armadura
type
te
armor
dice
will be something vest or
el
El
tipo que es.
atributo.
Sí.
El tipo que es.
Same with all these. They're all going to be called that. And you might go, oh, that's
O
kind
sea,
of limiting.
evasión, energy, sí,
But
la armadura
that
y los
limitation
híbridos.
actually kind of breeds really interesting creativity to actually accentuate them more. And like I said, you get a cool gradient that happens as you go through the stats and it loops back around. Yeah, so everything's strength will just look massive. Like,
La plate es gorda,
what's the unique, the bronze one with the massive...
¿Cuál es la armadura?
Brass stone.
Aunque hay que reventar ahí y pegar el puñetazo.
Same thing with all the items.
Le pega ser
Pet
diseñador
peeve is
gráfico,
when you're
así
working on all
como
these
tan
things.
desganado.
So
Me lo
many
veo con una
things,
tablet delante
boots,
dibujando en un día lluvioso.
helmet, gauntlets, and after a while, just from the art managing side, I got really annoyed. I was just like,
No es ya que esté
what is
nervioso,
this
que lo
again?
puede estar. Es que lo que está explicando para él lleva un montón de horas de curro, pero no le despierta una emoción muy bruta. No es
Qué
como el que
nervioso, si
juega-
no tiene nervios, tío, hombre.
No es como el que está jugando su boss y hace sus mecánicas y ve sus... No. Este se dedica a pintar y colorear.
No dices como Chris, que ayer casi se le rompe la voz.
Se confundió de muffin para merendar.
Like said, the gauntlets, right? They've got like these ones here have got a bit of a leather bracer aspect that kind of starts transitioning over to what the Dex ones do, which will be only focused more on this area.
Abraham, respira así porque el pobre no tiene energía, no tiene sangre en las venas.
More,
Au.
just more identity between them.
Se equivoca de branch.
Here's a good example actually versus PoE1 because I think the Dex Int gloves are called the mittens, right?
Yep.
And that always bothered me because a mitten style like gauntlet is actually a thing, and it's a very strong, strengthy, bulky looking
Creo
thing. So
que
all the
son los
strength
dos
gauntlets are now
developers.
called mitts. All the strength
El
ones
de
are
la
the
derecha
ones
lleva una
that are
camiseta, o sea que entiendo que sí. Este
Sí,
está haciendo la
Every
exposición, o sea que
strength
entiendo que
gauntlet
sí.
will have this like real chunky vibe that
A ver,
just
desde la
separates
camiseta
itself. You're
100%.
not gonna like feel like it looks like it could blend across 3 different
Este tiene que ser, que
classes.
es el que montó
So I think we just get more variety of
El dibujante o como mínimo el líder de
gear
proyecto.
this way.
de todas estas armaduras.
I think helmets is the best example of the gradient I keep talking about. Where Dex
Yo no sé
is
cómo
where
la
I've got
gente
hoods,
de Destreza e Inteligencia ve,
but
pero...
you'll notice that Dex in, there's a hood. Strength Dex, there's a hood. But the defining feature of that is
Yo no sé cómo ven los de fuerza, que llevo una rendija de mierda. No me jodas, mira el de abajo a la derecha. El de fuerza de destreza.
Yeah. So I've talked about base types for a bit. So now I'm going to go over the difference between base types and uniques in PoE2 from an art perspective.
Se llaman pelotas y sirven para almacenar.
It's something most people, I guess, don't think about.
Contenido genético.
But we
A
try
este
to
tío
treat the
hubiese
base
salido a
type
hacer esta
as very
conferencia
clear,
fumando un
distinct
porro
writing.
y no notaríamos la
It
diferencia.
still is stylistic. It's not just this
Era
like, I just threw it
ruina,
in the renderer and hit
la
render
que había
type
más a la
thing. Like
izquierda,
we
la
have
de
placed
arriba,
lights and we've tried to make it look as cool as it
una
can.
con Iron
A ver si la
It's very,
ponen.
it's very
Sí.
Que es una
Pues,
Iron Point. Para quien no lo escuchara ayer durante la presentación, gente, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo estáis, guapos, guapas? Hablaron de que había 700 tipos de ítems, 700 bases, y cada base tenía su versión legendaria. Hay al menos 700 legendarios en un juego aparte de las bases.
Every base type in PoE2 will have a unique associated
Ahí lo
with it
tenéis.
at launch.
Cada
Every
base
single one
tiene
of
un
them.
único.
And every single base type has unique art in and of itself. There's no base type that repeats. You will not get a shield later that has the same name, has a different name and same art. Every single act has entirely unique art all the way through the game.
Creo que acaba de decir que no hay una sola base que tenga
To me,
dos,
the
que
unique
solo tienen uno.
having a bit of
Sí,
a
190 legendarios basura.
that it
Lo que ha
comes
dicho
from
no
is
es que
kind of important
cada base tenga un único,
because
sino
otherwise
que
it
cada
kind of
base
ruins
es
the item identity
única.
of both.
En el sentido de
If
que
you had
no te
like
vas a
a unique
encontrar
sword that was like a
dos ítems.
scimitar,
que
like
Ayer sí dijo lo de que cada base tenía un único.
No, pero lo que ha
base
dicho
type
ahora
is
no,
just
lo que ha
a
dicho ahora es que
straight
cada
blade,
base
it's
es
kinda
única.
Sí, ahora ha dicho eso, que no te vas a encontrar...
Base type that has a curvy blade,
Vale.
it's like
Claro.
kinda common sense
Ahora
to
lo
me.
que pasa, ahora por ejemplo pasa que hay bases distintas pero que tienen el mismo arte. Y él está diciendo que no, que en el 2 todas las bases que tengan distinto nombre tienen distinto arte.
Mola.
O sea, que una espada de fuerza y una espada de destreza van a ser completamente diferentes. Igual que una espada de inteligencia, de fuerza, de destreza y
Incluso
demás,
dos
¿no?
espadas de fuerza en diferentes rangos van a tener
De hecho,
un dibujo diferente.
Todo lo que nos está enseñando, que nos ha quitado ahora era la base y su único.
So this is actually unique
Sí,
armor
ahí
that
sí,
they
era la
don't know
base
about. Doesn't do anything yet. That's lit how we would do a base type. And then here I remove it all and I try to give it some more character, make it look a little bit more moody and a little bit more special.
Joder.
No lo están haciendo solo en vídeo, ¿no?
Si
no, si lo estuviera haciendo,
pero-
compensa de sobra la falta de sangre.
Es un vídeo, porque el tío está de pie sobre todo, pero... Que digo que está muy bien hecho el mesh.
Lo que no tengo muy claro es para qué está el otro ahí en el escenario. Por si se desmaya, recogerlo.
O aplaudirle.
And as soon as you get to Act 3, they're going to look very vile, and you purchase them
¿Ves?
just from the vendors.
Yeah, so the vendors
ha dicho
of
yep.
each act only sell gear that comes from that particular act. They don't sell, like, you don't go to Act 2 and you can't buy Act 1 gear.
And you just get more distinct looks. I personally really wanted that gigantic stone Aztec shield, and people were worried it was too big, and I said it might not be big enough for me. I wanted it this thick. Anyway, so this
Oh, se ven muy
sort
bien,
of
¿eh?
getting into the art focus of items
La de la
in
derecha,
terms of,
de la derecha al centro, la que está a
some
la
tropes that happen in
izquierda del arma de
fantasy
asesino,
art in games
si
quite
fuera
a lot that
suficientemente
kind of bug
grande
me.
es del
All that stuff is obviously
de
AI,
cazabestias,
crap.
del Beast Hunter.
But I mean, you know, it looks cool. When I was 13, I would be like, hell yeah, it's got spikes all over it. But after a while, you've seen these. They're in every game. They're in everything. There's so many games that have that, and just loads of it. And you can infinitely produce. I mean,
Floretes.
AI just
muy
did
bien.
4 of them like in half a second. Whereas this stuff is from our world,
El que está sentado, gente, es el que tiene que hacer la exposición. Y el que está de pie explicándolo es uno que pilla la puerta, se lo explica por encima y le ha dicho, te doy 50 pavos y lo repite. Y el que está sentado, que curra pali, se lo ha quedado todo. Pero lo está haciendo bien.
Me está diciendo que lleva una semana sin comer porque es diseñador gráfico y que lo han sacado aquí directamente sin un puesto ni nada, el pobre.
We do a lot of investigation on the environment side with stuff. Like early on, there was talks of like how the Marraketh would write musical notation and how that would affect sculptures on the walls and like the environment art, and then trying to get that into like the item designs and stuff as well. So a lot of thought goes on there to like get things to have a real rich sense of culture, because for a game that's all about items, you don't want everything to just look like a jagged spiky sword every single time, or like just cool flaming blade of blah. You just want,
que se dejan las puertas secretas y lo estoy
there's a
diciendo,
place for that.
no sí.
But having just like a spoon, just a weird spoon, and that's the unique, is kind of cool to me. There will be a spoon.
What is it going to do?
You figure that out. So this is the part I really like, is that I personally make a lot of weapons and items and stuff. But the cool thing is I make all these unique items. Oh, this is a drop, by the way. This is nothing.
Sí, la daguita esa roja es reconocible, la de...
Around the whole building, it still wouldn't get them all. They keep going. There's many. Anyway, they don't know about them. Most of the time, I'm just making them. And then I sort of give it to them, and to me it's kind of like they've actually found a unique, and they don't know what it does. Like it's actually unidentified, and they have to be their own little Deckard Cain and be like, what the hell does this do? Which is really exciting to me. Like I don't know, this little weird wand up the top that is basically a hand holding a bell.
Gracias por mantenerme la silla caliente.
Mira, ahí está la terminus, está la...
Que me valía lo mismo.
El hacha está verde, de nivel bajo.
¿Cómo lleváis la meta de Sub Plus? Pues me parece que estamos a 4 y tenemos... ¿Qué estamos a 29? Tenemos 2 días para sacar 4 subs. Vamos bien, yo creo que llegamos sin problema.
Anyway, that was just a little tease of stuff. I just wanted to just show you that the items in PoE2 are going to be very rich, and every unique is going to have a lot of interest and just flair and just feel like it came from somewhere. It wasn't just like always just it looks cool. Like
Muchas gracias,
no queremos responder
a
esa
lot of them
pregunta.
are going to be really well thought out.
Nos ha ofrecido Abraham a los streamers un uncrada de contratos y alcanzamos 350 subs de pago, de que tú cojas y te pagas tu propia sub en vez de usar un Prime o que te caiga regalado. Y estoy a punto. Entonces, como estaba muy cerca, lo comenté hace unos días en el stream.
Hey, so let's talk about item mechanics then.
Esta es la parte que tú decías.
I'm a game designer at Grinding Gear Games. I mostly work on item stuff. I've been working on them for a really long time, although, of course, I do other stuff as well.
Sí, sé que lo tengo que hacer 3 meses, soy consciente.
It is no secret
pasito.
that we think items are very important to this game. Like, we just spend all this time talking about just what they look like.
Sí, te reto a que digas el nombre bien.
Like, we want items to feel real. They're more than just a collection of stats. And now that PoE2 is a game in itself, we have a chance to look at items all the way at its very fundamentals and try to make some changes that we couldn't make in an existing game because of the worry of how you would port existing items over to a new system. So I'd like to go over some of these fundamental changes with you. So this is the first problem that we really wanted to tackle. In Path of Exile 1, different weapon classes don't necessarily feel that different from each other. Like just take an axe and take a sword. There are some light stat differences. Some of them have faster swing speeds or faster damage per hit. But how much does that difference actually matter? So for this reason, we added implicits to all the weapons. So every sword has an accuracy-related implicit in most cases.
Entiendo que
Axes don't have implicits.
quien esté viendo el stream a estas
Maces
alturas
have
como que
stun-related
entiende lo que está
implicits and so
explicando.
on. And
Está
it
explicando las
helps.
diferencias
It
entre
gives
armas
them
en
a bit of
fase LBO.
identity, but it doesn't really
Y hasta qué punto
make them
quieren
feel
que
that different,
realmente
right?
notes
Like
diferencia
you'll
entre una
start
base y
just
otra en LBO.
swinging a bunch of stats.
Que no
The
sea
other
una cuestión de
problem
más
too is
velocidad,
that
ataque, accuracy,
most
etc.
skills you can use with kind of any weapon. So what you really care about is, at the end of the day, which is the weapon that's going to do the most damage, and I'm going to use that weapon. So I want to talk about the attribute, like attribute alignments in this game, and we consider this very important as a way of aligning certain attributes with different mechanics in the game. There are some new weapons in there. I'll let you look to see what they are. But effectively, what we do is we associate different weapons with different attributes, and that sort of gives us
¿A qué se refiere con
No, lo que está diciendo es que las armas que hay hasta ahora, pese a que su base pueda tener un poco de diferencia de ataque speed o de crítico, de accuracy, al fin y al cabo una espada y una maza no se diferencian entre ellas. Lo que quieren hacer ahora es que el tipo de arma sea realmente determinante y va asociado a un atributo, cada tipo de arma. Uno o varios atributos.
Si le sumas el hecho que lleva una gema implícita, muchos de ellos cambian totalmente la mecánica.
We have tried to emphasize these differences really heavily in Path of Exile 2. So I just have,
¿Cómo es que la diferencia hace 15%?
La diferencia es gorda, ¿eh?
And you can see the difference in critical strike chances is much higher than what you might be used
¿Y por qué usaría el hatchet?
So a dagger is going to start with 15%. And then you have mods that improve it over and above that. So when you're using a dagger, you're really going to feel like you're critting a lot. Whereas an axe, you can see the base damage of the weapon is going to be, like per hit is going to be quite a bit higher. But all this too, like this is going to change like how you view weapons, but it's still not entirely enough as well. Because ultimately the difference between a mace and an axe, for example, is the sort of attacks you can do with it. So we have, so in Path of Exile 2, most attacks are going to be usable with a single weapon. So this immediately makes designing new attacks.
Otra de las diferencias que quieren hacer es que no solo depende cada arma tenga su atributo asociado, sino que cada arma tenga su ataque asociado. Entonces que va a haber ataques que solo vas a poder usar con un tipo concreto de arma.
They do slightly less damage per individual hit than a mace, but they're still primarily strength aligned, so they're going to do a lot of damage per hit. But on top of this, what defines an axe thematically are themes such as culling and executes. And in Path of Exile 2, you can throw them. So that leads to a lot. That leads to really interesting skill design because you can throw them, wait for them to return. It's almost like a boomerang.
Como un boomerang.
Daggers. So daggers are sort of 50% in the int section, 50% in the dex section. So they're both high crit and high and have decent swing speed, but obviously per hit their damage will be lower. Thematically, what do you think of when you think of a dagger? They're mostly all about fast attacks, trying to find the weak spot of enemies, which sort of perfectly matches what they are in this chart. And they're also thematically linked to poison, which will really come out in the skill design for daggers. So when you have this identity of item class sorted in this way, you don't need to have an implicit
dilo tú, o sea, igual no sé distinto.
So we remove them. All swords do not have, an accuracy implicit. All daggers don't have, a crit implicit and whatever. So now that the implicit slot is empty, we can make interesting implicits that sort of make certain bases throughout the game feel very different to each other.
Vale, las armas, las bases ya no tienen implícitos asociados.
Dice que la gracia es que le pueden dar su propia temática para que cada una se sienta realmente diferente a otra. Que no es una cuestión de números, sino que es una cuestión de que el gameplay es diferente.
You'll find it at a certain level, and you might notice that this deals no physical damage whatsoever. Its base damage is just pure fire. So this is going to give you some interesting considerations when you find it. Like, how are you going to build for it, especially if the axe before and the axe after is mostly physical? So it's not just that it's a damage upgrade from the previous axe. There are these other interesting considerations to think about as you go through. Here's another one. Yeah, so this is a mace that destroys enemies that you kill with critical strikes. Now, it sounds pretty useful, right? That, because who doesn't want corpse removal on their weapon? But note that this is a mace. Maces are not necessarily that good at dealing critical strikes. It could be useful, but how do you make it useful? It's not interlined, so it's going to have low crit. There will be mods that can increase its crit, but still, the way you build for it is supposed to really make you think. It's not that it's necessarily immediately useful. It's cool to have these sort of thematic things throughout the game, and it's just a puzzle piece that is there, so that sometime in the future, someone might find something that they can do with this, that only this would allow you to do.
Deja las herramientas para que la gente invente cosas.
And have played the warrior class, you might have noticed that they have a mechanic that breaks enemy armor. It's primarily a mace mechanic, but there is a dagger that does it here. The mace skills are normally the ones that interact with this in a number of ways, but a dagger does it. Breaking armor is obviously useful.
Bueno, es una daga, sí, pero es un breaker, es un florete.
Oh, that's an exercise left to the user. I'm sure there'll be a million different broken things that'll come out of all of this.
Bueno, no, foil es florete. Foil es
So let me
florete.
briefly touch on caster weapons. So in PoE 1, they were quite strange, right? Like you had a staff.
Vale, armas para magos, para casters.
And they had attack attributes, and they could roll attack mods. But you're a mage, you don't want to hit people with the staff, you want to cast
Sí, claro, tienes un problema y es que los staff, varitas, etcétera, tienen daño, pero es un mago, no lo vas a usar. Es un error de diseño.
Like, of course, they did improve your spellcaster mods, but because there were all these mods rolling on the same item, it was really hard to get a good one. We tried a bunch of band-aid fixes over the years. Like, I'm sure you're well aware of us introducing rune daggers and splitting staves into regular staves and war staves, but they didn't really fix the underlying issue. So we feel it's better to break out these concepts entirely. So in PoE 2, wands and staves will have no attack stats whatsoever. They just come with the skill.
No tienen
directamente
estadísticas porque no te interesan.
Las armas de caster no tienen estadísticas.
Para que no lo sepa, la probabilidad de golpe crítico, velocidad de ataque, etcétera, de este tipo de arma se aplica a los ataques. Los spells no son ataques
Porque tienen
y tienen
el
sus
crítico en la
propios,
gema.
correcto, tienen sus propios atributos, su propio crítico, su propio
Daño
velocidad de
base, todo
casteo.
lo tiene la gema.
Va todo diferente, entonces todo lo que ponía arriba era inservible. Esto es una forma de hacer que realmente esto es un arma de caster.
Which is obviously really good for skills with really long cast
Que
times.
supongo que tendrán mods asociados a los casters.
Here's an example of.
Se acaba de tirar en la habilidad de un list que hace que tire varios casteos de golpe y que eso te lo da un arma es muy útil.
What about people that want to hit people with staves?
Esto
So we
sería para
have split
atacar
out the melee
con el
portion of
staff.
stave
Esto es un monk.
into its own weapon class called a quarterstaff, and it's sort of thematically linked to the monk.
Critical strike
But
10.
again, this is
Dice, ¿qué
part
pasa
of
si
Exile.
quiero golpear a
Anyone
alguien
can
con
use
una
any
vara?
weapon and do anything.
Pero soy cuerpo a
All
cuerpo.
the mods
Tiene
here
18,
are
o
obviously
sea,
attack-related
es la primera
mods.
base.
And here is a
50,
particularly
nivel uno.
interesting one, which has a longer range than every other quarterstaff, and you can actually see its art looking longer than the others in-game if you compare two quarterstaffs together. So, we've talked about the two, I would say, core
No sé si el
archetypes
rango
that
afecta y
we
Flicker
sort
Strike en
of,
este sentido.
support in Path of Exile 1 with attackers and spellcasters, but trappers and miners, of course, are another
Trampas y
archetype
minas.
that sort of got left in the dust a little bit in Path of Exile 1. Like, they were fully supported with a bunch of skills and everything, but they didn't really have gear that was specifically designed for them.
No,
They just sort of
el
used,
range no afecta
faster
a los
weapons,
strike.
you know,
Y aparte,
it
no va a haber las
increased the
mismas
damage of their
habilidades.
skills, but it's really thematically weird because they're not a mage. They're supposed to be mechanically aligned and that sort of thing. So we wanted to add an item type that can be used specifically with trappers. So the first major change is traps are no longer spells. Traps are just trap damage, and there will be ways to improve specifically trap damage that are not
son
related to
spells.
spells.
Vale, las traps no son spells, sino que
This is an
son
example of the new
un ítem.
beast type that you can use in your main
¿Y qué
hand.
pasa
It
con
takes both your hands,
las que
and you
tiran
can see
spells?
that the
O sea, las que,
throw time of the
en
trap
plan de que
is listed
transforman
on
una spell en una
the
trampa.
item itself. And yes, that means you can modify it further
La
with
trampa
mods on
también.
the item.
Esto
The other
es
thing you
la
might
nueva
notice
base de armas
is that
para poder usar
it has a
mods.
detonation type.
Y trampas.
That is because we have
Esta
sort
en
of
particular,
combined the
bueno,
concept of
es
trappers
mismo.
and miners
No,
into
estas son
one thing.
trampas.
Mines are also trap skills, but with a different
Y
detonation
te
type.
dice
So
qué
you can
tipo de
take any
detonación te
trap skill,
aporta.
swap your weapon that you're using,
Da
and
un-
it's
Dice
now
cuánto
mined.
tiempo va a tardar
It's
en
not
lanzarla.
that you have to specifically find a mine skill to use, to actually have that
Pero ha
playstyle.
dicho antes que
And
las
the other
trampas ya no
interesting
iban a
thing
ser
is,
spells.
with the
Iban a
new
ser su
weapon
propia
swapping
cosa.
system, you can have a trap in your alternate weapon set, so you
Entonces,
can still use other
la
skills,
gema que
but
nos
still
da, tío.
trap occasionally if you really want to as well.
Dice que vas a seguir pudiendo usar.
Yeah, I do have an example of a mine as well. So this
trampa
one, as you
para
can see,
castear.
will have the detonation type, which is manual, which requires you to detonate them afterwards. And
Uno,
yes, just like
doble.
other weapons, there will be
Detonación
implicits
manual.
on some of these throughout the progression.
Esas
So you'll
son
have these
trampas para
interesting
que tú detengas
considerations on
manualmente.
trappers as well.
Eso no existe, ¿verdad?
No. Las trampas actualmente
So
no
the other
detonan
archetype
manual.
that never
Solo
had
minions.
a specific item class dedicated to it was minion builds and general support type characters. Like we've tried a bunch of band-aid fixes over the years, like about the convoking wand, and we've added bone rings, and we've done a few of those things, but they don't really fix the root of the problem. They do help, but what you really want is a set of items that you can find throughout the game that is specifically for this particular class. And
Estos son los míos.
as you know, we've added spirit as a concept, which is for our skills that were previously reserving your mana, but it also is about permanent minions also use your spirit. So if you want more zombies, there's no such thing as just getting plus zombies. It's just increasing your spirit gives you more zombies. You can use as much of your spirit as you like to get as many zombies as you like. It is completely dependent on how much spirit you have.
O sea, que capeas
So we
los
obviously
minions en
wanted
base a la
a base
cantidad de
set to
espíritu que
support
estés
this, and
dispuesto a
scepters are
reservar.
thematically perfect
¿Sí?
for this kind of thing because they were also kind of weird with the whole half attack, half spellcaster type of thing. So, I have some examples of scepters here. As you can see, the mods almost always grant aura-like
Estas palabras.
effects, or they improve the spirit on the item itself.
Y para los
So it's
minions.
almost like you get to build your own aura and
lo he
hold it in either your main hand or
Increase
your
Spirit
offhand.
ponía una.
You get to have that flexibility where, if you're not planning on doing much attacking or spellcasting yourself,
Hispano,
then
mañana.
hold it in your main hand, have a shield, and you're pretty defensive, and you get to buff your allies or your minions, or your allies and your minions, I should say. But if you want to, let's say, do some attacking as well, then you can just hold it in your offhand if you like. And then you can still have a weapon in your main hand, you can do some damage, for something like a build that would be similar to Dominating Blow, you can still have a weapon, and you can still buff your minions in your offhand. You can also put it in your alternate weapon set if you want to just buff your allies once in a while and not all the time. But just be careful not to use the extra spirit that you gain to use your minions, because when you swap out, your minions will go away. So we've talked a bit about skills before. So as you might have seen in the keynote, we had a big problem with how skill gems dropped in Path of Exile 1. Because the more skill gems we add, the less chance you have of finding the one that you particularly want. And because to solve this problem, we added gem vendors in Path of Exile 1 so you could get one at any time that you like. But that isn't also the correct solution, because what that means is it's just trivial to get any gem at any time. And at that point, why are they even itemized? Like, you should just have access to your skills, right? So in Path of Exile 2, we wanted to both have the fun moment where you find a gem of like a higher tier, but also we wanted to not prevent you from just using a skill that you want to use at that particular time. So we've added uncut gems. So regular skill gems no longer drop, and you just find uncut gems of a certain tier. And you can use them to turn them into any skill of that particular tier. And they come pre-leveled. So what that means is it's a lot easier to switch into a new skill, because you don't have to then re-level that skill from level 1 and wait for the damage to come back to what the current skill it was that you were using. Like, you can just seamlessly swap from one to the other. What this means is certain gems just don't exist at lower levels. For example, I think Firestorm is a 28th skill in Path of Exile 1. So in this, so here, you might get Firestorm at level 5, and levels below level 5 just don't exist.
Anunció la nueva liga ayer. Y lo que están hablando es que puedes hacer una conversión de coger una gema que ya tengas liberada y transformarla en otra. Transportando, llevándote el nivel.
You generally don't pick up rares on the ground because if you're going to pick them up, 9 times out of 10, they're probably going to suck, right? Like you're not going to use them. There are a number of reasons for this, and we are trying to address a lot of these reasons when we're redoing item drops from the ground up in PoE2. But there is one particular reason that I wanted to talk about, and that is actually because of how the chaos orb functions. So, if I pick up, let's say, a helmet of item level 70 and another helmet of item level 70, and I use a chaos orb on both of them, it doesn't matter what you picked them up. It doesn't matter what item it was that you picked up originally, because they're now completely new items. The only thing that mattered is the item level of the item that it started with, in both cases. The mods that they came with just no longer matter anymore. So every base type is effectively the same, just as good as every other base type for the purposes of, you know,
diciendo que por culpa del caos, como cuando me puedes tirar un caos y renovar el objeto, entre comillas, es irrelevante lo que te cae del suelo porque puedes tirar, pueden caer dos cosas, dos bases y le tiras un caos y da igual lo que tuviera.
Ya que es un objeto completamente nuevo.
So this means the item that you start with matters a whole lot more when it comes to this. Because you pick up a rare, it has, you know, 2 to 3 great mods, maybe 1 or 2 really bad mods. Those rares previously were not going to be useful because it didn't matter that it had a few good mods, because it also had those bad mods that sort of made the item not worth using. But now what you can do is you can just, you know, like every item could be 1 or 2 chaos orbs away from becoming a really great item. Whereas previously those rares were still not good because they didn't have those good mods.
Exalte,
and now you will
ya está en el juego en forma de
for
personaje de
a lot of
trial.
these sort of near miss rares. Just use one, and if it doesn't work out, well, the item wasn't that fantastic to begin with anyway, because it still had those bad mods.
Entonces el caos va a perder valor.
If one of those bad mods turns into a good one, then that would be fantastic, and that would really improve this this feeling of the items in the ground mattering more, because what you started with now is of paramount importance. But if this was the only change, then the best way to make items would be to, you know, start from a magic item,
El del gorro parece que se va a morir ahí sentado, macho.
thousands it would take,
Ahí, de
and
medio
then
lado.
regal, and then do that. So for that reason, we're making a few changes, but the first one is that alteration orbs will no longer exist in Path of Exile 2. So the way to do this is you must start with a good magic item or a good rare item, or you can create one with a transmute or a chaos orb.
Vale, a la mayoría os importa 3 pitos porque no crafteáis. Pero la gente sí craftea, les acaban de joder totalmente el sistema de crafteo, porque pillabas una buena base y la reworkeabas infinito hasta sacar lo que querías. Ahora, tal y como funciona, la base ya tiene que tener algo bueno de base y dependes de un huevo de suerte para poder terminarla. Y eso es un problema, porque les obliga a estar recogiendo la misma base una y otra vez para ver si de suerte les cae con algo que ya sea mínimamente bueno.
Bueno, al menos
para que
le va a dar mucha importancia más a los únicos, porque los únicos ya están hechos.
Claro, es que esto va a hacer que se jueguen muchos más
Pero no porque sean mejores, sino porque estos son peores.
Porque es más difícil sacar un objeto resistencia a vida.
Que los únicos te lo van a poner más cómodo en ese sentido.
Es una putada.
No puedes sacar con Alteration T1 resistencia, T1 vida y tirar un regalo y
The support unique that I made back in 2013 was Cloak of Defiance, which
Pansito, no tiene nada que ver con lo que se hace ahora mismo, porque ahora mismo tú una vez tienes la base la puedes reconstruir entera. En PoE 2 la base ya te tiene que venir con algo para que sea realmente viable craftearla.
So we want to make many unique items for everybody. They are meant to enable wacky things. They're meant to let you do things that you thought would never be possible and possibly be build-defining. So I have an example of a low-level unique that we made. I wish we had more to show you, but this one here is pretty interesting in that it always freezes enemies for its full duration when you hit them the first time. So you always have a really strong initiation as soon as you walk up to an enemy. So, like Dane mentioned, every base type will have a unique, and that includes a lot of new uniques. But don't worry, what this also means is we are going to be bringing a lot of your favorites from Path of Exile 1 into Path of Exile 2. Because is it really a Path of Exile game if you don't have a Headhunter or a Shavs in it? Yeah, exactly. So it might be slightly different to what you might be used to. You know, a few stats might be different here and there as a result of the mechanics changing, but they will be instantly recognizable as a result, and you'll have a lot of your favorites that you used to that you used to like playing with in Path of Exile 1, and you will have a lot of new ones as well.
No se puede quedar fuera el Magalo, no se puede quedar fuera. Tienen que traer todos.
I think that's everything from my end. I guess we have some time for questions.
La base es se la borran. Última buena.
Que borran avis.
A ver, si borran los Stygian Vise, tendrán que meter algo que pague un poco la pérdida de todo eso.
Si lo que quieren es que en base a tu build elijas una cosa u otra, lo único que tenemos ahora mismo es cinturones con vida, cinturones con atributos, cinturones con predisposición a energy shield, cosas del estilo. El Stygian Vise es superior a todos en todos los aspectos, salvo 3. No pueden meterlo si pretenden que tengas alternativas.
And if we have art available, then we try to fit the stat to what the unique art is already there. But generally, sometimes it's, you know, we have this crazy idea that we're like, can we do this? And it's like, well, it sounds cool, let's do it. And then we make an item and it's just a blank item without a name, without any art. And then we try it in game, it's like, this unique is awesome. And then we make the art for it. So it can go both ways. I would say more often than not, at least in Path of Exile 1, it's been mechanics first into art. But, you know, that may not be...
Yeah, and PoE2 it's more the opposite for now because for a long time they didn't really know what they were doing with items, and as basically a blacksmith that just smashes things out really quickly, I was just like, that's a cool sword, that's a cool sword, that's a cool sword. I just make all this stuff, and yeah, they're gonna find that treasure trove of stuff and turn it into stuff. But I think it's really valuable to have art that can inspire gameplay stuff that they weren't even thinking of. Never entered their mental.
Oh yeah, that happens a lot, I would say.
They'll just see it and go, oh, this thing's like split in two, and it could be like...
¿Qué pasa con las esencias? ¿Qué pasa con los fósiles? ¿Qué pasa con Harvest? ¿Qué pasa con todo? ¿Qué pasa con la mesa de crafteo?
So let's see what else we got here. Do you have any memorable uniques from PoE1 that you have designed?
Oh, that is a tough question because I've made so many. I think one of my favorites, or at least I would say very memorable, was Indigon, because Indigon was probably the start of that entire set of mana-related spells that followed later. But Indigon was really the first. It was the first item that weaponized mana into a form of damage.
I have a thing for that as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask for the outside if you have any like of your favorite art pieces.
I've been doing pretty much most of the unique art
¿Fue el inicio de la build de mana?
I guess whenever betrayal
Es el yemo lo lleva a mi pues tilde. Que quemó un montón de mana.
Maybe?
Last 5 years. Something like that. And so I've done a lot of the art for them, and the art has a very different name to the final game. It's not even close. It gets changed. An interesting one to me is the shield everyone knows as the Squire. I think it's the thing with 3 white sockets.
Yep.
Yeah, I made them.
El Squire, por ejemplo.
I remember.
Because I modeled 3 white sockets.
Este tío modeló el Squire.
It's going to have 3 white sockets.
Yeah.
Pero que ahora que lo ha mencionado, ¿qué coño era el Squire?
Well, it was busted anyway, so adding the 3 white sockets, I don't know if it really
¿Qué
changed
coño
it
era
much.
el colgante lunetol?
But on that same day, I made that. I just made it, and they were like, "Oh, we need another shield."
¿A todos?
I was like, "Okay."
Una gema.
So I made a cooler shield visually, and that ended up being the oppressor.
Dice que joder, necesitamos otro, dice, vale, te hago otro igual de guapo, pero entonces creé el opresor, que es el fake.
If I knew, I would have not made it that cool looking. I'd have dug some trash out of the unused folder.
Yeah.
Let's see what else we've got here. In terms of making art and I guess items for an act, how are you like getting inspired or taking inspiration from?
We have really strong art direction people. Some come and gone. Shout out Chanda. And they
Ese gesto se merecía un GIF.
fabric of thinking over all of the acts, like really going into Marrakech and Val and Karui and others I'm not going to talk about, and just basically we would work with them and establish like common shape language and like themes and stuff, and just to make things feel cohesive and part of that world. Same kind of patterns and shapes and stuff like
Gente,
that.
¿qué os parecería si a partir de ahora hacemos así los streams
Por cierto,
con esta energía? Como
el chat de la conferencia es solo alabando a este tío, ¿eh?
Alabando.
Alabando.
Arrodillados ante él.
So the handle has to be
el
cactus.
pobre tiene mucha energía de sobra.
Otherwise it breaks the theme. It's like, where they get that wood from? It's like small stuff like that.
Another question we have here, are there versions of the early game bases that have stats appropriate for, I guess, towards endgame?
Oh, yes. So those implicits that you will see throughout the campaign will be repeated in endgame, in sort of endgame bases. So if you happen to like, something that an implicit enabled earlier on, you will be able to use it later on as well. Probably should have mentioned that.
¿Sabéis eso? Pues lo
I guess this is in reference to the chaos orbs.
Por hecho que va a haber influencia. Das por hecho que va a haber Atlas.
No, it won't, because
no, yo doy por hecho que la van a borrar.
there will not be any scouring orbs.
Lo que no sé es que habrá, pero yo doy por hecho que la influencia la van a borrar.
Acaba de decir que lo de scoring alchemy ya no va a servir porque no va a haber scoring suficiente.
Why is there no 75%
Claro, porque no
int,
existen.
25% strength or dex weapons? So like, why aren't you fitting
Han
more of
quitado
the
todas las formas de volver un
pie
ítem.
¿Blanco?
ratio?
No, Annulment.
No, porque a Annulment no le baja
There
el tier.
actually is a few, but it wouldn't have really looked really nice in that graphic because
Annulment
some
Exalted.
of the staves will have
No,
skills
porque
that
se
are
queda amarillo.
more
Se queda amarillo.
strength
no bajar
de amarillo a
and
azul o de
that
azul.
will
O de azul a
actually
blanco.
take up the 75% strength.
Puedes subir, pero no
in
bajar.
Si solo lo hacía el scoring y lo han quitado.
section of the
Correcto,
tree.
solo hace el
That
scoring.
is slightly more, nebulous.
Por eso ahora es tan
like in a
importante
little
que
way,
veas los
because
ítems
the
en el
caster
suelo.
weapons don't actually have those
Porque una vez que
base
intentas tirar
Porque
el
tienes
primer
que intentar
caos,
acabar lo que hay en el suelo.
si sale el primer caos y no te sirve, ya lo puedes tirar a la basura, ya no te sirve de nada.
Realmente el scoring no era lo único que lo hacía. Tenemos el speed. El speed te vuelve de amarillo a azul.
Ya, pero
Ni
a ver, vosotros estáis
Y tampoco
pensando,
creo que sigan las esencias, por ejemplo.
vale,
Porque son un
vosotros
caos
también estáis pensando que
dirigido. Los
están
fósiles son lo
complicando
que
el,
There's just a lot of questions. It's really hard to filter through
Si
all of them.
se lo tiras a un amarillo te lo regodea entero.
solo
Sí,
solo estamos
el caos
pensando
ahora
en
es,
que
Annulment
There's way
Exalted.
more than I expected.
No,
En que se
el
está
caos no
complicando
aparece,
el-
eso sí.
solo estamos pensando en que se está complicando el crafteo cuando no sabemos cómo va a ser todavía. Ya nos han dicho que los ítems van a tener
Tío, que puedas-
cómo ha funcionado para que tengas sus cosas.
Y que se supone que Harvest era un intento de ver cómo podía ser el crafteo y
Claro, pero
los cambios
a lo
que a lo mejor os dan una herramienta nueva de crafteo.
Aparte,
que
claro,
todo esto.
Sí,
Aparte el crafteo es nuevo, puede ser nuevo ahora, y es lo que han dicho, que una maza solo va a tener mods útiles para maza. No va a tener, lo dijeron ayer, una maza no va a tener mods de caster, por ejemplo.
No va a tener cast speed, no va a tener
Que a lo mejor se acaba
daño
la
al
época.
al hechizo de rayo.
A lo mejor
Claro,
ya
igual-
no van a tener 6 modificadores, ahora solo tienen 4, pero buenas.
Claro,
Pero
claro,
es
ahora
mucho más fácil sacarlo.
Was there a memorable
igual
you
es,
tried?
claro, igual es distinta la forma de sacarlo, no es tan dirigido como queremos nosotros, pero es la base del ítem es mucho más determinante, ¿sabes?
A ver, igual se mantienen las esencias, pero son un caos. En el del nuevo. Te quita una esencia, te quita un mod y te mete el mod de la esencia. Un fósil te quita un mod y te mete el mod favorecido del tipo de fósil.
Puede
where it was
ser.
supposed to drain your mana and heal your health.
Pero es que estás tirando demasiados
For
annulments.
technical reasons that I don't actually remember now.
Os
Lo que
olvidáis
haces
de
es
que
cambiar un mod
exists on
realmente.
an item that
Chris
also
Wilson
Con
ha
el caos lo que
dicho-
haces es coger un mod random y lo cambias.
unless it turned off your
Ya.
energy
Si quieres
shield.
prefijo, sufijo, mediana,
So,
algo.
when we
Si
were
existen
doing the
metamorfos, puedes
Legion
elegir.
Keystones, so we had to come up with
¿Existirán?
something completely different in the last week before the release
Buena
of
pregunta.
the release
Ya
of
lo
Delve.
veremos.
But I always really loved that idea. because
Recuerdo
it was
que
just a
Chris Wilson ha
really
dicho
cool
que no hacía
thing
falta
that,
volver esto
you know,
rootless.
and then when we were designing those millions of keystones when we were doing the Legion like
Ya-
the timeless
ya
jewels.
juzgaremos
This idea just
cuando-
came back, and I just kept
Si
pushing
la
it. I was
primera
like, no,
mecánica
we've
de la
got to find
liga
a way to
es
do this because it'll be really
algo
awesome.
relacionado con el
And
crafteo,
eventually,
no importa.
the way we were able to do it was, well, if you turn off ES entirely, then we
este es
can
el
do
más
it.
rico.
So
Pues toma.
it sort of works as a
Procede a probar.
downside, which, I mean, it probably did need one, at least at the time.
Vamos a
Yo me he
que
pedido
todo
la
esto
cena
se lo
también.
cierro por
There's a
ahora.
technical reason why it needed to exist.
No sé qué.
And I guess as the last question before
No me lo voy a
we
llevar a
run
ningún
out of
sitio,
time,
lo dejo aquí.
are there item types with three,
No lo hagas debajo del micro.
all three attributes?
O lo muteo un momento.
Not
Lo muteo
currently, no.
Aquí.
Yeah?
For now.
For now.
And with that, we have run out of time for this panel. So,
All right,
That's it.
thank you very much, and hope you enjoy your rest of the rest of Exilecon.
Anyone
Have
from
fun, guys.
Australia?